Dr. Benito is a clinical endocrinologist with an interest in the interaction of environmental factors, nutrition, environmental pollutants, and stress with the endocrine system. She's passionate about educating her patients and giving them practical tools to improve well-being. She's board certified in endocrinology, diabetes, and metabolism. She attended medical school in Spain and completed a residency in internal medicine at Pennsylvania Hospital, the University of Pennsylvania Health System, and a fellowship in endocrinology, diabetes, and metabolism at the University of Pennsylvania. She's also completed a 2-year fellowship in integrative medicine at the University of Arizona, where she is guest faculty. She's a certified meditation teacher and also currently is studying herbal medicine at the David Winston Center for Herbal Studies. It is truly a pleasure to have Dr. Benito on our medical advisory board, and it's a really rare find to somebody who practices the way that she does between integrative medicine and really treating the whole person, and we're so pleased to have her here today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So we're going to talk about menopause and how we can navigate through the change. And we're going to talk mostly about foods. I'll make some mention of some botanicals and some supplements as we move along. So just to get ourselves oriented, menopause is a point in time. It's a time when you haven't had a cycle for 12 months. So we usually say the time of menopause, the year at menopause. So that is a point in time. Now, the menopause transition, which we used to call perimenopause, we still call it sometimes perimenopause, is a transition, it's a time, it's a period of time. So it could be up to 14 years, usually 7 years, but up to 14, where women experience changes, which can be a variety of them. Could be irregular cycles, hot flashes, night sweats, irritability, sometimes from not sleeping well, sometimes because of a change in hormones, weight gain, vaginal dryness. So again, that usually happens 7 years before menopause, before that point in time, but it could be up to 14 years for some women. The average age at menopause in the Western world is 51 years, but anywhere between 40 and 58 is considered normal. And what happens in menopause is that we lose some of our female hormones. So we lose estrogen and we lose progesterone. Those are the two main hormones. And that has some effects on different parts of our body and our system. So it can affect our blood pressure. It can increase cardiovascular risk in women once we get into menopause. That loss of estrogen doesn't keep us protected anymore. It affects bone health. The dramatic change, the dramatic loss of estrogen in menopause makes women lose bone, mostly at the spine, a little bit at the hips. It also affects glucose regulation and affects weight gain, and we'll talk a bit more about that. Affects mood, affects brain cognition, and affects sleep. And of course also affects sexual health. So this is all that you can see in menopause, and it doesn't mean you're gonna have all of those. Those are all symptoms from low estrogen. And again, these symptoms could last, once you get to menopause, you can have symptoms for 5 to 10 years after menopause. So you have symptoms going into menopause and you have symptoms after menopause. And the symptoms are highly individual, whether a woman is gonna get hot flashes or gonna have bleeding gums or may have pain on her breasts or dryness on the skin is really variable. But any of these are possible. So hot flashes are probably one of the hallmarks of menopause. If it happens at night, we call them night sweats. Headaches, usually they happen more when women are going through the menopause transition. And that's because the change in hormones is actually what causes the headaches. Once you get to menopause and you have no more hormones, they don't tend to happen as much. Definitely there are bleeding gums, and there's something that I think women notice as they move into menopause, so that perimenopause transition. The breast usually initially may become enlarged, maybe some breast tenderness, almost like if you're gonna have a really strong cycle or you were pregnant. And once you reach menopause, the breasts usually become smaller, usually because we don't have as much breast tissue. Breast tissue is nourished by estrogen. So the lack of estrogen, usually lack of breast tissue. There are some changes in the bladder. Women will have either urgency or incontinence. That's an effect of estrogen as well, or the lack of estrogen. And the bones may become more frail. changes in the uterus as well as the vagina, with vaginal dryness, itching, difficulty with intercourse. The skin will become dry. It might become tingly, and that's something it's a symptom of menopause, and it almost feels like you have ants crawling under your skin. Women may have palpitations. There's a little bit of an excessive sympathetic tone. So sympathetic is the part of the nervous system, almost like your fight or flight response. So there's a bit more of the sympathetic when we lose estrogen. So women tend to have sometimes palpitations, sometimes with a hot flash, sometimes without a hot flash. It's the same reason some women actually get a bit of anxiety or panic attacks. It's a sympathetic overtone, if you wish. There are some psychological changes as well, memory, anxiety, mood swings. I don't think of loss of libido as being psychological. It might be, but loss of libido in women has many different causes. And of course, there's systemic changes like weight gain. So why do we get hot flashes? So if you look at the right at this figure that I put here, this is what we call the thermoneutral zone. So that's the zone, that's the area, the temperature, so the highest and the lowest temperature that our body feels comfortable at, right? Once we get into menopause, we shrink. The thermoneutral zone sinks. And when it sinks, that means that now you have less ability to tolerate temperatures that are either above or below that zone. You don't have as much of a leeway anymore. Remember, so look at this. You have a lot of space here that the temperature goes a little hot to get a hot flash. But here, you actually, even with the same as before, now you get a hot flash. So that's why doing things that allow you to keep that temperature in range, so whether you're cooling the room or you're using something to cool your neck, or you're taking a cold shower, anything you do to help keep yourself here is going to prevent a hot flash or the chills that happen after a hot flash. It's very interesting how we are now learning that hot flashes have a very strong relationship with heart health. So it is important that when, especially if you're having hot flashes, that you really try to keep a healthy weight and trying to maintain a good blood pressure. There's a big relationship. Some things that we've learned that are good for heart health as well as for hot flashes is having a high fiber and a high vegetable diet. Consuming foods that are high in fiber and a lot of vegetables. There is a study showing that Mediterranean diets lowered hot flashes by 20%. There's a study showing that high fiber and high vegetable will also lower hot flashes. Some people recommend to keep a diary for triggers and to do this for 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, you write down what you do, what you eat, what you drink, and you see what triggers your hot flashes. And that can be helpful. There are some foods that have been linked to hot flashes, and those include alcohol, caffeine, and spices, especially hot spices. Refined carbohydrates have also been linked, and it's very interesting again how we are now seeing association between fluctuations in sugar and hot flashes. So eating things that are high in sugar can actually make your hot flashes worse. Can also make your palpitations worse, can trigger the sympathetic overtone. Clearly a high fat with a high sugar diet has been associated with more hot flashes. A bit more about foods. There's a lot of talk and research on soy and other phytoestrogens. So phytoestrogens are plant estrogens. So these are your natural estrogen supplements, and vegetables such as garlic. They all have these phytoestrogen, these plant estrogens. As food, we know they're safe, again, in moderation. As a supplement, the data is actually quite mixed for safety and for efficacy. So I don't think I would recommend anyone to take a phytoestrogen or a plant estrogen or a soy extract supplement. But if you want to incorporate these foods, and some of these actually have a lot of fiber, so there are other reasons that they might be beneficial. There are some foods we call cooling, as well as drinks or botanicals. So sage tea, mint, coriander, cumin, they're all cooling. So you can have some sage tea, mint tea. You can put them at your bedside if you want and take a little sip. If you get a hot flash to try to cool you down, or maybe if you wake up, take a little sip so you keep that thermal neutral zone in that space. You don't go above it and trigger a hot flash. In traditional Chinese medicine, they talk about cooling foods or yin foods. When women get to menopause, women are thought to have yin deficiency. So we lose yin, so we get hot. So if you eat foods that are yin, that are cooling, that might help you. So those foods are root vegetables, nuts and seeds, fish, seaweeds, cucumbers, melon, berries, mung beans, and other beans, such as soy or black. So many of the foods that you see here correlate, right? There are other things that we can do that are not food, and those include hypnosis with cool imagery. So imagining that you actually have under a cool waterfall or any sort of cool water is helpful. There's studies showing that. There's also studies on acupuncture and yoga, and there are studies showing that stress reduction also brings hot flashes. For many women, stress will trigger a hot flash. So stress reduction techniques or yoga or acupuncture will bring them. Again, that's another, there are ways that you can actually lower that sympathetic overtone. We're going to talk a bit about weight gain. So weight gain does happen in perimenopause and menopause, and the menopause transition. And there are a couple of reasons for that. The main one is that the lack of estrogen does make our bodies a bit more insulin resistant. So our bodies are less able to process calories, to process sugar. Our fat cells also change. Usually what happens, or what this does, is to make us gain weight mostly in our bellies. That's when women will put it through menopause. Many things that are not nutrition related can help. Definitely lowering stress, increasing muscle mass. This is a big one for women, especially in menopause. So ensuring that you have especially strength training exercises. So whether it's lifting weights or doing some anything that has that is strength, a strength training exercise, not training, sorry. And also focus on sleep. When you increase your muscle mass, your body is actually more insulin sensitive, which is what you want. You want your body to be able to respond better to calories that you're eating. If you have more muscle mass, some of the food that you eat, some of the sugar is going to go into your muscle, not into your fat. So getting more muscle is important. What's recommended for women when we get to menopause is that we consume 21 grams of fiber per day. In general, women are supposed to be consuming about 25 grams of fiber. In menopause, it goes a little bit lower. Magnesium-rich foods are known to also help with weight gain. And again, this is magnesium-rich foods. There's no data on magnesium supplements for weight gain. Anti-inflammatory foods, we know that they lower insulin resistance, and that's why I wrote them here. There's not a particular study on anti-inflammatory foods, except studies on vegetables. So that part, we know there are studies on it that will help lower weight in women through menopause, and also using healthy fats. Avoiding sugary foods and drinks is beneficial, as well as meditation and yoga. There are studies on meditation as well as yoga that show that if you practice any of those, your body becomes less insulin resistant or more insulin sensitive. Again, you're going in the right direction, which is what we want. Let's talk about bone a little bit. There are many factors that affect bone in women in menopause. Clearly, estrogen is a big one. So if we don't have enough estrogen, we definitely need to work on other factors that we can definitely affect. And those are protein. In menopause, we need close to half of our body weight in pounds in protein. So think of your body weight, half is the amount of protein you need, grams of protein you need. All right, so half your body weight, grams of protein. That's what you need, about, okay? If you exercise, you might need a little bit more. Whether it's animal or protein or plant protein, they both decrease the risk of hip fractures, but there's at least one study that suggested that plant protein was better. And that makes sense. We've known for years that animal protein, especially in excess, can increase the loss of calcium from our bodies. You actually put more calcium in your urine when you eat a big, a high animal protein diet. So, you can mix it up. You can figure out how you do it, that you don't rely all on animal protein. The amount of calcium that is recommended for women in menopause is 1,200 milligrams per day. Now, this should be done through food, not through supplements. I think we have enough data today that calcium through supplements can be detrimental, can be bad, and it actually can make our heart risk increase. So not a good thing. So how do you get your calcium? Well, if you're somebody who tolerates dairy and can do dairy, dairy is quite packed with calcium, is added to milk or milk products. So 300 milligrams of calcium per serving, and that serving is either a cup of milk, a cup of yogurt, or an ounce of cheese. If you cannot tolerate dairy or can only tolerate a little bit, but you still need to get to those 1,200 milligrams, you're gonna do it with sardine, salmon with bones, almonds, banana squash, spinach, kale, broccoli, any pretty much of your very dark green leafy vegetables will give you calcium. And then other foods like sesame seeds, edamame, beans, and chia seeds. And I'll show you how much of each one gives you. Now, if you look at studies, when the things that we eat that are not rich in calcium, so things like eggs or oranges or even bread, not that I want you to eat bread, but if you did, all those have calcium. Not a lot, but they have calcium. So in general, it's thought that with all those foods that we eat that are not necessarily rich in calcium, we get to about 250 milligrams per day of calcium. So if you had to get to 1,200, but you already have about 250 with the things that are not rich in calcium, you probably need just to get to close to 1,000 for calcium-rich foods. Magnesium is also important. A diet low in magnesium has been shown to increase the risk for bone loss and for hip fractures. So I'll tell you also about magnesium and how we get magnesium through our diets. Vitamin D and vitamin K are important for bone. Those I think are a little hard to get through food. The vitamin D, you probably get some with salmon and other foods, and I have a slide on that. But there are not many foods that are rich in vitamin D, so you probably have to take a supplement. Vitamin K2, it's not very easy to get through diet either. You probably just find it in natto, which is this fermented product. So it's a little hard. Vitamin K is abundant in greens, but that's not the K that has some data for bone protection. We think of K2 as the vitamin that we want for bone. And again, that's only available through natto. I put a question mark on probiotics. A couple of years ago, there was a study looking at L-reuteri, a probiotic that you find in dairy products, as well as fermented vegetables and in sourdough, as a probiotic that actually prevented bone loss in women from the spine. So it was a study before women lost bone, when women were entering menopause or in that perimenopause transition, they were given L-reuteri. L-reuteri is can be grown in our bellies, and interestingly enough, research shows that we don't have as much L-reuteri in our guts in today's day as we used to have, decades or I guess centuries or whatever they started gut microbiome. We're losing our L-reuteri. So a way that you can, if you cannot take any fermented products because they bother you, you could eat either yams, beets, honey, or artichokes. They all allow you to promote the growth of L-reuteri in your gut. I want to mention phytoestrogens, just because I think you need to know that phytoestrogens, for them to work on bone, you had to convert them to something called equal. And in the population, in Western populations, only 1/3 to 1/2 can convert phytoestrogens to equal. It is unclear whether that's the reason why, whether we convert phytoestrogens to equal or not, is what explains who benefits or who doesn't benefit from phytoestrogens. As far as I know, there's no one good test to tell you if you are somebody who converts phytoestrogen to equal. So I don't tend to use phytoestrogens for bone protection in women. I think there are many of the things, including protein, calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, and probiotics that can help women protect their bones. This is what I was mentioning before. This is, I put this together just to show you how you can get your calcium through foods that are non-dairy. You'll have access to the slides. You don't have to write this down. You'll be able to get access to this so you can then, print it and keep it in your fridge, and you get a sense of what you're doing every day. So I think it's important. If you want, you can just take a look and see, okay, what am I doing every week? What's my average for sardines or spinach or collards or salmon or chia seeds, or how much am I doing? What's my average per day, let's say, if I take what I eat in a week. And then you can say, well, of the things that are here, what are the things that I could eat more of, or what things could I incorporate that might allow me to get to those, close to 1,000 milligrams in my food to help me get to that amount of calcium. I want to talk a bit about insomnia. Insomnia is big for women who go through menopause. Part of that has to do with the loss of progesterone and estrogen. So regardless of whether you get a hot flash or not at night, of course, if you get a hot flash, you're going to wake up. Women lose progesterone, as we talked before, and the lack of progesterone is what contributes to the lack of deep sleep. So progesterone is important for deep sleep. If we lose progesterone, we don't have deep sleep. And that's why women will wake up. And the typical time when they wake up is between 2 to 3 in the morning. That's a typical menopausal time to wake up. There are some studies that have shown that eating a diet that is high in fiber helps insomnia. So it prevents insomnia. If you eat fewer plain carbohydrates, your sugary foods, if you eat fewer of those, that also helps, because foods that have added sugar or foods that are high in refined or non-whole grains are associated with insomnia during menopause. There's also studies showing that if you eat more vegetables and more fruit, you also decrease the likelihood of insomnia through menopause. And at the same time, eating more nuts and more whole grains. And again, those also have fiber, so it makes sense that they will help you. They also have magnesium. So magnesium-rich foods also help. When people have done studies, lower magnesium in your diet is associated with sleep problems. We talk about that thermoneutral zone, that zone you want to be in so that you don't generate a hot flash. That means that you need to keep your room cool so that you don't get over that neutral zone. And there are some studies looking at melatonin, but the data is actually just to when women have problems falling asleep. And I don't usually see that in menopause. I think more women in menopause have issues waking up at night and then having a hard time getting that deep sleep at night. This is just to review a bit about magnesium. The amount of magnesium we need in a woman who is going through menopause is 320 milligrams. And these are your magnesium-rich foods. So whether you eat green leafy vegetables or nuts, legumes, whole grains, avocados, or salmon, they all give you magnesium. Here is just to give you a sense of how much magnesium each one of those have. So if you think of 320, you need to have, maybe a cup of chard and a cup of spinach, or you're gonna have a cup of spinach with a cup of black beans and maybe some cashews or almonds, or you can have beans and quinoa with maybe a dark chocolate. So you have to mix and match, but you need to do a few of this. It's not just enough to do one. You will not get to your 320 milligrams of magnesium that you need. We talked about changes in mood, and clearly hormone fluctuations may cause increased irritability, anxiety, and for some women, a bit of a blue mood. There are things that are not food related that can help. Relaxation, any stress reduction techniques, getting a massage might be beneficial. And then there are foods that have been shown to help with mood. And those include omega-3 fatty acids, whether it's salmon or flax seeds or any others. Hemp seeds have also omega-3s. Vitamin D rich foods. And like I said, there are not many that give you vitamin D, but wild salmon does, salmon does in general. Wild salmon seems to have a bit more D than the other salmon. Tuna, mackerel, they also give you D, but they can be high in mercury. So you have to watch that, right? It's a balance, almost like anything else. Halibut, cheese, wild mushrooms, and egg yolks give you D. Egg yolks don't give you as much as salmon. So, you cannot just do this and think that you're gonna have enough D. They won't. But you can definitely include those if they work for you. And you definitely want to lower your intake of foods that are high or that have added sugars, because they will make your mood worse. They will make you more irritable. Is that spike the up and down in your sugar, right? that affects mood. And we know that even if you're not in menopause, that's known about sugar. Exercise can help mood. There are some societies that recommend keeping an appreciation journal, so things that you're appreciative for. I think that's a really nice suggestion for us as we go through menopause. Many times appreciating ourselves, right? That's also important. And making time for ourselves. I think menopause is a time for women when women realize that it's important that they take care of themselves. It's a call to action. I want to talk about botanicals a little bit. There are some botanicals that have data for menopausal symptoms, and others have not been studied but have a long tradition of use. If you're going to use a botanical, I think it's important that you talk to a practitioner, whether it is a naturopath or a physician or a nurse practitioner or an acupuncturist, somebody who has some knowledge about those botanicals, especially with interactions. If you're taking medications, you cannot just take anything off the shelves and take it. You probably need to speak with somebody. Black cohosh is interesting because the data is quite mixed. It's sort of, as my herbal teacher David Winston says, is the menopause herb. And in traditional medicine, is actually not a traditional use for this plant. In Native Americans that never use black cohosh for menopausal symptoms. There have been some concerns for liver. They seem to actually be mostly cleared. We think that probably doesn't really affect your liver. Estrogen effects are not likely, so it doesn't give you estrogens. There are other reasons why it works, or it might work for hot flash. And again, the data is actually mixed. I don't tend to use black cohosh in my practice for menopausal symptoms, or at least not the hot flashes part of menopause, maybe the mood part. Red clover has case reports, so just individual cases where there was benefit. In 5 studies, it wasn't shown to be beneficial. This one is concerning with estrogenic effects. So if you're somebody who has had any estrogen-related conditions, whether it's endometriosis or you had breast cancer or endometrial cancer, red clover is not something you should use to relieve menopausal symptoms. Donui is another herb that is traditional for female issues in general. There was one study that didn't show any benefits, but it's unclear the study really used what an herbalist would have used for Donui. Chase tree, it is an herb that traditionally is used by herbalists for hot flashes. I do tend to use it. And again, my only recommendation that if you do, that you speak with somebody to make sure that you don't have an interaction or a contraindication for the use of chase tree. That's also called Vitex. Ginseng has been found to be beneficial for mood, for sleep, and for well-being. It hasn't been found beneficial for hot flashes. And, I wouldn't expect it to be beneficial. Ginseng is warming. So if something is warming, you're not gonna like it. It's gonna increase that thermoregulatory zone. Now, American ginseng is not as heating as the red ginseng. So maybe in a low dose, you could get away with it. Licorice is concerning for estrogenic effects. It's also concerning because after 4 to 6 weeks of use, for some people, it would actually raise their blood pressure and it will lower their potassium. So something to be aware of if you're gonna be using something that has licorice in it. And purified pollen extract is an interesting one that, some GYNs are actually using for their patients. This one usually comes with vitamin E with it. Vitamin E actually has no good data for hot flashes. Purified pollen extract doesn't have an estrogenic effect, has been tested. And we think it works similar to some of the antidepressants that we use in menopause, not because we think that women get depressed and then they get hot flashes. It's because these antidepressants work to inhibit serotonin that has to do with that regulation of temperature. So some medications that are SSRIs or these antidepressants help with hot flashes. And it's possible that this supplement works in the same way. I wanted to put together a slide. It's very brief. It doesn't have, of course, everything that you could do, but just to give you a sense of how you could actually combine foods in a meal plan in a day to give you what you need through menopause. So you could think of having salmon, which will give you omega-3 fatty acids, which will lower your inflammation and improve your mood. Also gives you vitamin D, gives you calcium to protect your bones, gives you protein, which is good for muscle, but also for bone health, as we talked, with an avocado, which will give you fiber. So you get a lot of benefits just combining salmon and avocado. You get about 100 milligrams of magnesium with that combination as well. If you tolerate it, you could have a black bean salad. You could do a cup of black beans, or you can use half a cup black beans with half a cup edamame or green peas. That will give you fiber, which helps weight regulation, hot flash regulation, heart health. It'll give you also protein, will give you magnesium, and will give you calcium that is good for bone. You can add herbs to get more of the anti-inflammatory potential. You could add some chopped spinach or kale, and that will give you calcium, some magnesium, other anti-inflammatory properties as well. And that, when you calculate how much you get 175 milligrams of calcium, 120 of magnesium, 22 grams of fiber. You're done for the day. That's it. Go rest. And it gives you quite a bit of protein, 17 grams of protein. You could also use nuts and seeds, maybe for snacks. If you want to have a snack, those that are healthy for fiber, magnesium, and protein. You could use veggies with some hummus. Things that are crunchy also help us relieve some anxiety. So if you have carrots or, maybe cauliflower or broccoli as something you're crunching on, or celery, or fennel, that might help you not only give you some fiber or anti-inflammatory, but help you with the anxiety part. You can have a mixed salad, and you can put, lots of different greens, maybe some bitter herbs, maybe some of your wild herbs. You could get some amaranth or lamb's quarters or anything you want, and add some garbanzo beans if you tolerate it, or other beans or peas. You can add some nuts or seeds. You could just put chicken if that's all you can tolerate for protein. You could put your salmon and your avocado. You can do a big match of things. You can do a smoothie. You can put berries, chia seeds, cocoa, cinnamon, yogurt. Now, cinnamon is a bit heating. I'm going to say that. So I put cinnamon for the anti-inflammatory and for the sugar lowering properties, but it can be a little heating. So you might need to watch that. Maybe do without cinnamon one day, cinnamon another day, and see whether it makes a difference or triggers a hot flash for you. You can also have just plain chicken or any other meat you want with some basil or mint. Again, this is cooling. Basil is in the mint family, so it's cooling. You can also put some turmeric into it for the anti-inflammatory properties. You can add some sauerkraut for your L-reuteri probiotic. You can put some chard or collards as stir fry, as a side dish, to give you more calcium and magnesium. You can use a chia seed pudding for your dessert, and that will give you more fiber and more protein as well, and omega-3 fatty acids. In general, what you should aim to do is to eat vegetables or berries at every single meal, and focus on adding fiber-rich and magnesium-rich foods, and do not skip protein. Make sure you have protein with your meals. Just some thoughts. It's a transition, so you'll get out of the transition. Make sure you get support and you keep connected. Social support is really important for women. Do not give up. This is a long term. It's not something you're going to do a crash diet and lose your weight and be on your way. I don't think crash diets are helpful in the long term. They actually shut down your metabolism. You want to find the best way to nourish yourself and stick to it. You eat well, but in a way that supports your own metabolism. Maybe the things that I talked about, the black bean salad, maybe that doesn't work for you. That's okay. You don't have to do that. You can figure out your own way. And just know that food can improve hot flashes, can improve your sleep, your mood, your palpitations, which sometimes we see in menopause, and it can prevent or modify your weight gain. So with that, thank you.